Project, A New World by Anonymous. This video book of Do I Stand Alone deals with many issues including faith and government. If you are not open-minded about such subjects, you should not read this. These writings deal with education, voting, police, drugs, and a new type of faith system that revolves around science and an equal standing in creation for all women and all races. It is a faith based in saving the earth now and supporting all life equally. This was written by someone near the end of life from a rare terminal cancer that decided to write a paragraph for Reddit about how he believes in God, but not the way everyone else does. Then, because of reasons he can't explain, his mind went much further in a spontaneous fashion over the course of a week. Ever since, he debated within himself if he should ever tell someone, including his family. So he has chosen to just be anonymous because his time is past, and he just wants to inform anyone that will listen and see if anyone else feels the same and is willing to take his torch to help others that are searching for answers. Written by a realist's mind, it is meant to open your eyes, to make you think and possibly light a different path for your life. It looks at problems we face and attempts to apply realistic thinking in our desire to know what happens when we die. It is not a professional produced video, has grammatical errors, and not for entertainment, but a serious discussion of things we deal with in our lives. I hope you can see past its flaws and understand the overall concept. Since its creation, the political world has drastically changed, and the message of Do I Stand Alone has become the core of Project, A New World, to compete with things like Project 2025. Part 1 and 2 is about a new belief system called Free God. Part 3 talks about the climate crisis, education, drugs, police and gun violence, and the prison system. Part 4 discusses politics, new voting concept, and a final message.
You are about to read Part 1 of Do I Stand Alone, written by Anonymous, representing Project, A New World. 1. If you ask me, I would tell you that I'm just an average American guy and nobody special at all. I am a white male in my early 60s and not highly educated. I was raised in a typical Christian family in the Midwest of the United States. I realize that my world may be so very different from yours in different ways, from religion to government, but give me a chance, and you will soon see why. My children, the millennials, would describe me as a workshop dad with a side of computer geek. As time went on, I found a lot of enjoyment in a workshop, and staying in touch with technology has been a lifelong passion. My father was very religious in his later life. He was the guy that many churches have that volunteers for everything. Every day he was driving the church van, setting up, taking down the music for each service, and so on. He died when I was just a young teen. I then went to live with my mother. She is Christian, but not to the degree my father was. I feel I have been born in just the right time for me. I grew up in a world with modern plumbing, electricity, and modern medicine. I was never one to think how great it would have been to be born in any previous time. A time that you could pack up and travel across the country or even the sea and you could live free. You must remember, though, that since the beginning of civilization, there was a cost to that independent freedom. Living in groups was safer, and there was eventually always a king that wanted to be paid for that protection. We go from that to where we are today, basically, grumbling about paying too much in taxes, the curse of civilization. I always have had an interest in making art of some kind. I have never had that gift to recreate what's in my mind on canvas, and that's why I'm so impressed with dreaming. I can't draw a face to save my life, but my mind can put together a whole movie of its choosing to play for me while I sleep. I can make people and things say and do anything my mind wants into a neat video clip in my mind. With all of us having this ability throughout time, it's no wonder for me to see how some people could interpret these clips as messages from the beyond, or even from God himself. Especially if a dream is from a strong faith follower, a leader, or a king. The problem is that we have come through history with all our religious baggage of past men, and someone like me is able to see upcoming problems. You see, up till recently, one man or group of men could never jeopardize the human civilization or near all life on this planet. Nobody possessed that kind of power yet, and that obviously has changed. Now, a very few men could in fact pretty much destroy the human race, be it with nuclear weapons or some other technology. This possibility now exists. Worse yet, I believe that in a few cases there are singular individual dictators that now possess the power to make his own people launch nukes at a country. Never before has such power been possessed by an aging mind, and in some cases even think of themselves as godlike. This is very dangerous, especially in an environment of people having a strong belief that there is a next physical life. 2. I struggled with religion in my younger life. Up till my father passed, I was all in. I loved the church and wanted to be there as much as possible with other kind people with their families. Some of the most honest, good-hearted people can be found in any place of worship. The problem I first noticed when I was young in the church was that everyone thought the other faith was wrong or flawed. Even though they were trying to please the same God, they each believed that their method of worship is the only way to everlasting life. I know you are sitting there thinking, I'm talking about Islam, Christianity, or Judaism, but I'm not. I'm talking Christian to Christian faith. The members of my father's church strongly oppose any alcohol, smoking, or gambling. They wouldn't even use wine for their sacrament. They used grape juice. My father believed that Catholics do all those things and pray to people that have died, like Mary and saints, which was a sin to him. So I would imagine that this goes on in other faiths as well. So other than being born into one faith or another, where's the consistency in any of them? It's like over time everyone came up with their own message and claimed they got the right one. Why would a God that is always watching allow that to happen? If you follow the ancient texts, he was pretty hands-on in the beginning when we didn't know anything. Then all of a sudden we have a whole system based on faith and not maybe just one floating mountain or something to prove all this magical power in their stories have any base in real earth history. 3. I had one problem when I was in the church with my father. I could not stop feeling like I was just talking to myself when praying. Everyone around me is so taken in and feeling this emotion that never came to me. Sure, I joined in, not wanting to stand out. I was just not getting out of it what they seemed to be. I often felt it was maybe just me, and I should ignore it. I was just a young teen, and all the adults that I had grown to admire and trust seemed so sure of it. The problem must be with me. Soon after my father passed, I left the church. I just could not bring myself to pretend I felt anything. Even at a young age, I just could no longer believe the stories of the church as real events. For me, if you want me to have this faith in what you're telling me is true enough that I'm going to live my entire life for it, and it to guide me in all my decisions, the story needs to make sense with everything I know. I can see how they could make partial sense back when first told but fail horribly in a modern world. I see a history filled with religious leaders fighting with anyone that presented proof of something the Bible had wrong. Then we end up with a portion of the population literally living in a fairyland of fables and wishes versus those in reality. I know they wish for it to be the way it was written, but you see it was all from a man's mind that wanted certain powers. It's a layer after layer of man seeing himself as an empowered person beginning at home and his wife. A man made the first fables that turned into literal laws and rules that limited the role of women in society, religion, and near everything else. The way that it all started against women, and even thousands of years later is still affecting young girls' lives around the world, is horrible to me and just about any clear-thinking individual. That is the part of religion that has always bothered me to my core. To me, I see those horrible intentions of those early men trying to lift themselves up and place themselves above women and the other races of the world. My realization was with women first in my life, and the disenfranchisement of the races was realized much later. I seen the church try to stop others from learning, investigating, and educating others of the truths of this world in order to continue their stories of faith. My mind is not able to blindly believe a fable being told to me that someone is representing to me as a real event in history. If I am told of a storyline, I don't just put bookends on it and believe that little slice. My mind automatically tries to justify it for it to be considered real. So I play out the fable in my mind forwards and back in time and exactly what it would take to really happen. That is when everything falls apart real fast, even if you add in the power of a god. It is too difficult to explain in a paragraph, but maybe you could try it. Take a biblical fable and play it out completely and apply everything we now know, going in and out of time, and see how fast things spiral out of reality. For me, I then think of the person that first wrote the biblical story and what they were like in real life. Then I think of how that person thought about women and the other races and including them in their creation storyline, only after time and not in the original creation. Yup, everyone on earth is from one white man, including women. That's the story in a nutshell. I know they were telling me to have faith in the message, but I hit my breaking point. I knew I believed in God, but not in the way they wanted, because I believed God would never want that. For a woman or anyone else's life, God created all life equally. 4. I am in no way a knowledgeable person in all the various faiths we have today. I've seen many similarities in Christian, Jewish, and Muslim faiths. They seem to have different takes on similar stories. They all seem to believe in the same God, even though they use different names. I believe we are all talking about the creator of the universe and all there is. I believe they have the story of creation, which starts with Adam and Eve, each story providing answers to many unknown things such as geological and weather events, volcanoes, rainbows, and who we are. But now we know that the earth is a living thing in a sense. We now know that its crust is always in a very slow-moving state of constant change. Its surface is never going to stop moving, and in that it is going to do what it has been doing for billions of years. So every earthquake, volcanic eruption, storm, drought, or any other event is not an act of punishment from God like they all tended to believe. Since the first men were not able to see the earth in its entirety, remember many thought the earth was flat in the time of and before Columbus, there was no chance for them to realize the enormous machine of kilometers of rock, soil, water, and bacterial life in a constant state of churning and renewal that makes life on our planet possible. It's not just about breathing air, but the whole supporting infrastructure of the planet working in unison over millions of years that makes all the life we now have possible. We are way more sensible and knowledgeable about the workings of the universe, including Earth itself. We need to see that the Earth needs to continue doing her thing, and we need to understand and be accepting of this. Everyone now accepts that life is way more than what we can see with our eyes and other senses. Life on Earth extends down into the rock and soil in ways we only now can see. So the story of creation is much bigger than any of those early men could ever see or realize. They were children taking their first steps and not the source of ancient knowledge. Even today, we are not ready to claim we know everything. You can reach down for a clump of earth in your hand, and we barely know 10% of the life you are holding. We have a lot farther to go, but we need to get there, and following the paths we have today, it's hard for me to see us being successful unless we can open our minds a bit more and stop looking back for answers. Our ancestors that had a hard time with just the knowledge and importance of basic hygiene in preventing disease and did not possess some special ancient knowledge. 5. The current totals for the Earth's religious faiths: Christians 2.3 billion, Islam 2 billion, atheists 2 billion, Hinduism 1.6 billion, Judaism 15 million, Buddhism 520 million. If religion could just be what it is, just a faith, there would be little harm from that. But we are living in a world of men that use religious beliefs to unleash never-ending killing, dominance, and governmental rule based in religion, and we need to stop this for a number of reasons. We can only imagine what life was like when we were transitioning from beings living in the wild in groups to uniting those groups and everyone trying to get along, to be civilized. Obviously, we were able to transition from group-friendly wild like many primates to civilized with our ever-increasing intelligence, but I'm sure it was a slow journey. If you ever look at the last 1 million years of our development, you will see a huge span of time where we began tool use and created fire to when we started gathering into cities. It shows us that it really did take a long time to get civilized and develop our humanity. One way or another, we were able to come together and get ourselves to where we are today. I am sure that the religions helped with that journey to get us past our fears of unknown things. That is why, be it good or bad, I will always be grateful for it because it got us here. The 10 Commandments and many of the teachings of religion were not bad things at all, and were probably instrumental in establishing social norms to live by. I am sure as we evolved and our intelligence evolved, realizing death had to be difficult. We now know that mourning the dead happens in the animal kingdom as well, and we need to see how that shows that we are infantile in our understanding of all life. Can you imagine those men of the old world that were establishing the image of man being above all other life forms, and the belief that God was a human would have thought of the Neanderthals? If they possessed the knowledge to find them, and were able to see how another non-human organism buried their dead with tools from their life and even simple musical instruments such as a flute, to have to acknowledge that there ever was such a competing intelligence that wasn't human, would they accept their intelligence and the existence of their souls like they do for themselves? We can see how much man has struggled with the question of what is after death throughout time. The one thing we do know is that everyone is affected by these thoughts. It was the cost of intelligence. Just as the common man or woman thought about it, so did the kings, queens, and pharaohs. A king feared death as much as anyone. It would seem natural for a king to surround himself with religious leaders that told him what he wanted to hear. Maybe there was a way to live forever. Mostly the church propped up the king, and the king often supported the faiths like a symbiotic relationship. You had men that ruled as a divine figure, but various religions allowed some rulers to be declared a ruler picked by the divine, and we then have the beginnings of royal blood. This concept of divine-inspired rule still carries on even today, and you can see evidence of this with the evangelicals in the USA, labeling some mega leaders as such. Then comes a king or leader that becomes a believer and sees his reign as the educator of the world. God would be so pleased that the king supported belief in God or Jesus. He orders a book to be assembled and printed. You now have the Bible or any of the other religious books, laying out a clear path for all future man to follow. We have no clue how they made Stonehenge or the monolithic structures on Earth, but we know every detail about the first two humans, their family and daily actions. We know the names, places, and every little detail of people's lives that were born thousands of years ago. But think aliens built the pyramids. We forgot how to make a mummy, but know the exact size of a boat to carry every living creature of the land. I know they have even worked in dinosaur eggs onto the ark now, but when will they address all the insect mass, microbes, and other unseen and unknown? Life in the soil of the planet, they breathe and need air too. Now do the math on all of that and see how it works out. You need to see the influence of assembling a book filled with glorious news of your death, and for centuries have a dedicated group of people distributing that book across the world before we knew the truths of everything these books tried to explain. You would be amazed how far-reaching the will of these dead kings still remain today without you being aware. Take, for example, salt and pepper. I can obviously see why salt, it's unique and necessary for life across the living, but why black pepper? Why does that duel exist throughout the world? Well, you need to look no farther than a king of the past that didn't like strong spices in his food. 6. One thing we all have to remember is that a lot of power went and still does go along with religion. It just depends where you live. Those leaders of the church were often standing by a king. Many times the church found itself with tremendous power and influence. We see the absolute rule of law based in faith in some parts of the world even today. Look at the wealth of the leaders of some religions. Look at how their daily lives are often occupying and living in some of the most beautiful and expensive structures in the world. Imagine the value of the Vatican and all its real estate holdings. It would be hard to ever give that up. Even the wealth of some of the mega churches here in the US. I know we see the commitment to a low-key, simple life of the faith leaders out in the field and in your local church, but I'm talking about the ones at the top of these organizations. The wealth at the top is staggering to the average churchgoer. I ask myself why everyone is so blind to this fact and the grandiose lifestyles these men-only clubs live versus the lives of the people they are preaching to. It's hard for me to accept these men standing in such high status, telling the poor, they only need to just pray and continue going to church, supporting the church, and you will be rewarded for it in death. 7. One thing you can't deny is some of the atrocities that have been carried out in the name of God. The back-and-forth violence is horrible. There is no more vicious attacker than someone that is fighting in their mind for God. Can you imagine the influence on civilization from the Pope setting God's army loose on the people and demanding you are a Christian? From the raping in the early Crusades to the attraction in taking slaves in later ones, why would God want that? And what would you think Jesus would have thought of those actions from a church based on his supposed teachings? That all does not sound very Christ-like, rather more like the actions of a ruler than a man of God. To the priests that later would land on distant shores and islands, only to once they got by the language barrier, begin to tell the tribes that whatever belief system they had, maybe developed over thousands of years, is all wrong. Then begin to tell them their religious beliefs as if it's history. They often are telling the new people of various races and lands they just conquered, their faith that the world was started by two white people and a cast of all white players through time, only to include their race in the story, in the form of a fable of a punishment from God. How sad for a young Asian, Indian, or African not to see their ancestors playing a part in their story of first creation. So God created a white man first and everyone else came after that, including all women. I see how all of these societies of the New World took on the religious faith of their conquerors or slaveholders over time. Maybe it's time to include everyone equally in the story of creation and in your faith. 8. So there I am trying to pray when I was young, but I just was not experiencing the same thing others did. I would later see men on TV that would just before a commercial break go into a prayer and start naming cities and afflictions that God was healing people with that very moment. I see that and go, why can't I do that? Why do they get special treatment from God and why don't other people do it? They start to pray, and on the spot, God is talking to them as clear as day. So, they say, I'm only one person, and people much smarter than me believe it completely. Religion is so huge, and how is the whole world wrong? I am just one young man. It must be me that is wrong. My other views of religious teachings is that they set God up to fail. To stand there without any proof, religious leaders, including Jesus, make people look at God and wonder why every time something bad happens. A group of church kids killed in a crash, wars, disease, and famine, it's the same thing. People praying for help and no help arrives. God is always watching. God is with you. God knows all. Trust God, pray about it, and more. It sets God up for failure in my thinking. You can't tell people that God is watching while bad things are happening. For as long as people consider just praying as an action to solve a problem, we will be in trouble. Can you adjust your belief in God to be one that views God as the creator of all there is, but not a God that controls your life and demands certain actions from you in your life, or it will punish you for eternity? Could you be happy living a good, sensible life, and not one filled with the belief of demons and hellish figures that are always after your soul and want to seize control of your mind? It's amazing we don't have even more mental illness and behavioral issues in this world, with thinking like that being placed in our children's minds at a young age. I know you are trying to establish your religious beliefs of love and goodness while you're literally telling children that their mind can be infected with evil from this dark power. Then we scratch our heads when people talk of evil voices in their head. You are the one that instilled this belief in control of your soul by evil and are bewildered when some minds become convinced that they are overtaken by this illusion of evil and act on it, thinking they are infected and nothing they can do about it because of how powerful the devil and his companions are. It's amazing to me that all these supposed smart people over time don't realize the effect of our own teachings and how some minds will react to those teachings, especially when they are living a less than perfect life. They might grow up with abusive parents and then translate that to God doesn't care about them and give in to the thoughts that they then must be controlled by evil forces that they are powerless to control because they tried praying to God for help, but none came. What is that child to think when they are told to pray about what is harming or scaring them and nothing happens or changes? Can you see how that could start them down the road of believing God is not with them, so the devil must be in control? How horrible is that? I just can't believe how normal this thinking has become over time, and how people are needlessly programmed with this horrible life concept that was invented to raise certain people up while pacifying the rest into following. 9. At some point it seemed simple to just join in with the atheists. That would be easy. Our thoughts are just electrical signals in our brain. You live, then die. Done. Ever try to think of what it's like to be nothing? Like trying to imagine before you were born? You just can't really. Well, I can't anyway. I was like, okay, I can accept lights out. You will never know. But that just didn't sit well with me. I always felt there was more to it. It was my love of science that pulled me through that time of my life because I believe everyone wants to believe in something. The problem is what we have now is based on ancient fables that make no sense to a modern person. Yeah, there were stories of a major flood that covered the earth for thousands of years in the ancient world. Those early people saw all the past sea life of clamshells and invertebrate fossils embedded in the rock and soil on the sides of hills and rock cliffs to far and to high up from any sea. So they see how high they thought the water came and needed a story of survival of us and the animals of earth to explain these impossible things. I absolutely can see them thinking that around the world before we learned about plate tectonics. The flood storyline is one of the oldest fables we have ever found written, but we now know why those fossils are up there, and as we also now know of Pangea. So where do you stand? Are you on Team Bible or Team Pangea? What if I told you there is a way you could believe in the science of evolution and creation at the same time? A belief system of our modern age that combines a believable knowledge of the universe and its creation leading all the way to us now, but leaves room for what we don't know yet. It's an honest relationship between the known and unknown. No promises of anything, but yet includes the potential of anything being possible. And each person is able to see their own life's ambitions turned into a belief of a never-ending sensation of being alive that is intended to be as individual as you are. 10. You see, the first thing I had to do is see how the church wrestles with every scientific advancement. There are always plenty of religious groups that would like science to just shut up or go away on certain subjects. As each domino of religion fell, the believers just did not want to accept it, and some were bigger than others. People figuring out the stars, planets, and alike was difficult. People working on electricity dealt with the fear from the believers. Gravity, rainbows, and all the way to the Earth revolving around the sun was troubling at times for many believers to accept. Didn't the Pope even detain Galileo at one point? Every step of the way, science was removing the mysteries of the world. The problem was that it was not working well with the religious texts that people had come to believe in. We see even today how they twist themselves, to now even including dinosaurs into the 6,000-year Earth history story somehow. 11. We started out with Adam and Eve, the first huge misstep of religion in my opinion. As the story was told at the time, it was a good fit. People found it possible. Then it goes to Eve having her 2 famous boys, and from this we have our entire human civilization in less than 6,000 years, roughly. That is all way more believable before we learned about genetics. Now we know that we would be a bunch of inbreds, basically, and how did 2 boys build all of humanity anyway? There has to be a lot of mental gymnastics to make that all flow. The worst is how that one story sets off a long history of women believing that sin is their fault, and they are created from just a small, insignificant piece of a man. How horrible is that? You think you are an afterthought, but if I was writing the story from what I see, women are the birth of life. Without them, you would have nothing. Today, a woman needs very little from a man to produce life. Throughout the animal and insects, females are most often the dominant partner. Man thinking he is superior is laughable if it wasn't so horrible throughout history. That women had to fight since day one of certain religions for their rights in the creation of these religions. Rights to attend church, own property, education, and later on, even just voting. A woman needed a man to just function in that early world of man believing their own creation story. Problem is that some faiths are still holding down women to this day, and it's horrible. Because of some beliefs, women themselves choose to dress in public in a way they don't truly like, but do out respect for religious faith written long ago by a man. To think that women can't even drive in parts of the world today is crazy to me. I know they deep down want to live equal lives, but are respectful of tradition. No woman deserves to be born into a world where they are not equal to a man just because of ancient fables. It's hard to believe that there are still Christian temples today that a woman has never been and never will be allowed to enter, so it's not just a Muslim thing. 12. Then there is the story of Noah. My father would explain to me that the world was different before the flood and man lived much longer. We now know nothing supports that in science. Even as far back as 100 years ago, this story was very believable. They all thought back then that you only need 2 to make a baby. Well, now we know about genetics and gene diversity. We now know how important it is for the survival of a species. Once an animal is down to only 1 or 2 pairs, even all of modern science cannot save the species from extinction. So the animals step off the ark to begin walking across the earth to get to their original habitat? So they are all drinking brackish water since all the freshwater lakes melded with seawater. The carnivores had to complete the trip on an empty stomach since there was only 1 pair of any animal. Fish separated into salt and fresh water again. You see how this just doesn't come close to working without a whole lot of magic. I'm not going to begin to believe that every soul on earth was wicked either. In looking at the population of the whole world at the time, most people didn't even know the people on the other side of the earth even existed. I highly doubt they were all wicked in common, but it did help explain rainbows. 13. Jesus is a difficult one too. Yup, a baby born to a virgin. Works back then but fails today. A virgin can get pregnant today with never even being in the same room as the father. Jesus is accredited with a lot of witnessed events similar to that of faith healers throughout time since. Jesus didn't correct any of the wrong theories of his time, such as the rotation of the earth around the sun versus the belief at the time that the sun revolved around the earth. No explanation of anything on a multitude of subjects that they falsely thought in his day. Can you imagine if he just mentioned the existence of microscopic life in this world and the many lives that could have been saved, but it wouldn't be until the 17th century before we knew of this world that is so vitally important to our lives. I'm saying he could have told us about the universe, what those stars really were, that obviously his father created, but he was blind to things like that as much as any other man. The people standing there telling stories of the future and how they got all the answers to everything on earth literally had everything wrong, but it took the hard work and courage of others to prove what they were saying was all wrong. One thing you can say is Jesus' influence on religion was probably for the good overall. He brought a lot of God's love to the equation. There have been many men that claim to be Jesus across time, but his story stuck. Even today, you will find several Jesus-type figures claiming to be the Son of God, so they still exist if you look for them. During the time of Jesus, they were waiting for someone, And Jesus was a good fit, even if I think it was an afterthought, so to speak, in my mind. Jesus' birthday was chosen and not known. Even the year of his birth is not exactly known. That puts a whole new spin on the manger fable. You would think if they really believed in him at the time, there would be more from his life. If you really thought he was the Son of God at the time, why do we have nothing from his life? Nothing he built as a carpenter, no clothing, nothing. Yes, his disciples got a new religion and a book deal, but that's all we got now. I'm sorry that I can only speak of mainly just one religion. I was having problems with my own family's beliefs. I had little ambition to learn of even more stories I couldn't believe, so I apologize for my ignorance in your faith. I just feel like there could be others that have the same problems as me. I know there are places that are governed by various religious groups, and you can be in literal danger by not complying with the church. I am so sorry. Maybe someday you can either find peace or move to where you can find peace. A person in America can't even imagine what life would be like if we in the US had to follow the same rules as a Taliban-run area of the world. I know Islam is supposed to be a faith based in kindness to fellow man, but I just can't look past how women are treated. They are our equals. I choose to only talk of what I know of my religion. Even though I could search for this knowledge, it is for you to apply what I'm saying to your particular faith and to make the choice for yourself. I don't know how difficult it will be for people from deeply ingrained faiths such as that I see in many places that are enforced by required daily prayer, diet limitations, and daily rituals. I look at how faiths feed the masses of poor, but only because they hold the poor down by their traditions, limitation of education, and the lack of progress. 14. We have seen new religions start with pieces of an already established faith. These spin-offs often bring pieces they agree with from an established faith, then make the changes they wish to believe in. It doesn't take long and a new faith emerges. Then you have groups like Scientology, which is a whole lot of craziness to me. I look at those religions and think how they started. Could you have a faith based in science and what it has shown us so far? Could we stop treating faith as a business and education model? What in science is yet to be explained and probably never will because it's beyond comprehension? How do you explain the immense power it took in creation of the universe and creation of the first cells of life? Cells impregnated with the miracle of life and instructions from the Creator that if planted in the right conditions will find a way to live and survive. The literal ancient seeds of life itself, the true power of free God. So in just looking at the fact that we know the universe is expanding, makes us realize it must have had a beginning. So what if we acknowledge this one event as one that could only be created by an immense and knowledgeable power, because just like the faithful love to say, this doesn't appear to be all just by chance. It's too perfect of a system of life and the elements working together, and it's truly incredible. I only wish the early men had the ability to see everything that we can now and see the true immense power and intelligence it must have taken to create and implement the processes of the universe. We still attribute everything to a creator, but with a much larger and complex possible plan than they could ever imagine. It's just the first men instead used faith as a source of power for themselves and their benefit. The formation of the universe and all matter in it was a one-time event of creation and not an act of establishing rule. There has not been a request from the Creator of anything from us. That has only been the actions and voice of a man. Did the Creator have a plan including life after death? We don't know that yet, but I know we are not going to find the answers on earth. We need to be open-minded to a plan much bigger than we could ever imagine. But equally, we must realize that we could be living the entire plan right now. We need to realize that this and what we see with our eyes every day could be the plan. And what is wrong with that? There does not have to be an end date that some force is going to shut down the universe, stop the creation of new life in this fairyland of all that living being brought back to life. And if you lived by certain rules, you will live forever in some paradise that exists somewhere. The opportunity of being alive is the gift of life that we don't spend enough time enjoying because we are too involved in this next life storyline. There is no need to sit and wait for an event that nothing has told us except a man to wait for, but it stands to reason that if we have any chance of finding clues, knowledge, or information, we need to travel to new worlds in order to know more. I choose to believe there is more, but not in the way I've been told my whole life by those with such obvious ambitions, either individually or group-wise. I think we could evolve to looking to the stars for answers from the sit and wait for the second coming and Judgment Day storyline many choose to believe.